ونستعين ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. We're with Ayah 94, Ayah 94 from Surah Al-Baqarah. Ayah 94 from Surah Al-Baqarah, and within the context of ayat that talks about Bani Israel. Big portion of Surah Al-Baqarah talks about Bani Israel. And repeating again, for two reasons, as the ulama they say. One reason is to call them to the truth, because they were the nation before the Prophet ﷺ was sent. They were the nation that carried the message of the Tawheed from one messenger to the other. So they ought to be the first to follow the Prophet ﷺ, especially when they knew everything about the Prophet ﷺ and they were waiting for him. So they ought to be the first. And for the second reason, there is for this ummah of the Prophet ﷺ to learn from the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that never changes whatsoever, from this nation, and what happened to the obedient among them, and what happened to the disbelievers or those who transgress the limits. And the same thing will be repeated also for this ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, because again the sunnah of Allah, the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the same. And this is the benefit of the stories of the nations before. And as they say, Al-Qasas, Jundum min Junudillah. Stories is one of the soldiers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has a great effect. And the best stories is what's mentioned in the Quran. Although the verses here is not in the context of a story, but what's the benefit of the stories is that for a person to get to know the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. Because we are now living another story, right? So to know the beginning and what happened in the midst of it and the end of it from the nations before will give the person an idea how things also will be for the time that we live in, for oneself on a personal level, the struggle between the truth and falsehood, and so on. So this is a great benefit, of course. So this is how we should, when we're reciting these verses, we should ponder and reflect accordingly. Not that this is a nation before and it's just about them and that's it. No, it's for each and every one of us to relate to this and to benefit, so that we really make the Quran the means of our salvation, and to be steadfast on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. Ayah number 94, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قل إن كانت لكم الدار الآخرة عند الله خالصة من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولن يتمنوه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين ولا تجدنهم أحرص الناس على حياة ومن الذين أشركوا يود أحدهم لو يعمر 1000 سنة وما هو بمزحزحه من العذاب أن يعمر والله بصير بما يعملون. From 94 to 96, which let's take just the translation of 94 roughly, and then we'll continue inshallah. Say to them, if the home of the hereafter with Allah is indeed for you specially and not for others of mankind, then long for death if you are truthful. 95, but they will never long for it because of what their hands have sent before them, and Allah is all-knower of the Zalimeen. Qul, which is repeated in many verses in the Quran, which is Qul, O Ya Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Say, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the word Qul, this is a verb order, right, for the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam to convey this message, again to hear, to Bani Israel, to the Jews, those who are the descendants of Yaqub alayhi salam. And Qul, which is repeated in many verses in the Quran, is like shows that the Prophet ﷺ is the one that between the Ummah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That he was ﷺ the messenger. So there's no goodness that we would receive from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless we receive that through the Prophet ﷺ, the Quran itself, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and that's why he is the most beloved human being to every Muslim more than his own self. And also, which is an ayah mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, when the Sahaba radiallahu anhum would ask the Prophet ﷺ something, the verses of the Quran would be revealed. Qul, say O Muhammad ﷺ, such and such. يسألونك عن الخمر والميسر قل فيهما إثم كبير ومنافع للناس. They ask you about the al-khamr, alcohol, intoxications and gambling. They ask you about al-hayd. يسألونك عن الحيض قل هو أذى. Say O Muhammad ﷺ, it's adha, which means impurities and so on. So it's always qul, say O Muhammad ﷺ. But when the question, and this is something that the ulama they talked about, when the question came to the Prophet ﷺ about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the tawheed, this qul was removed, so that there is no one between the human being and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. If my slaves ask you about me, did not say قُلْ إِنِّي قَرِيبٌ, say O Muhammad ﷺ, I'm close to them. There was no قُلْ. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Indeed, I am close to them. Right? So it shows that how precise the Quran when it comes to the wordings, and how the Tawheed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected so much with the verses of the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, so that people would not be led to the worst crime ever, which is associating partners with Allah. So when it comes to the ibadah of a Muslim, there is no one whatsoever between the Muslim in his ibadah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if it's the Prophet ﷺ. Although the way we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through the way of the Prophet ﷺ. We will not be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless we follow the way of the Prophet ﷺ. So here, قل, say O Muhammad ﷺ to them, إن كانت لكم الدار الآخرة. In, if, right? كانت لكم الدار الآخرة. كانت in the past tense, which means also something in the future, something that will stay forever. If for you, الدار الآخرة, the hereafter, the abode of the hereafter. And ad-dar is a word that is used for whatever a person used for dwelling or living. House, they call the house ad-dar. And ad-dar al-akhirah is the everlasting dwelling, that a person would stay there forever. So say, O Muhammad ﷺ, to them, if you claim that ad-dar al-akhirah, the hereafter, the place where the abode forever, عند الله خالصة من دون الناس إن كانت لكم. If this hereafter is for you, عند الله, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, خالصة من دون الناس, which means خالصة from إخلاص, meaning it's pure, purely for you, من دون الناس, without anyone else but you. And it means here Jannah, because عند الله, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, means Jannah, because the believers will be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jannah is under the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you claim that you're the only ones that will enter Jannah, and it's purely for you only, and none else but you, فَتَمَنَّوُا الْمَوْتِ. And again, this is a claim that they have, based on what? Based on false beliefs, and how unjust that is if it's based on a race. Right? Because they say it's only for Bani Israel, right? None else. So all human beings, they cannot share this, right? When a human being is born, whether he is from Bani Israel or whether he is from some other, lineage, what is fault in him to be secluded or to be like this or that? And it shows that how Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is the most just. And it's all human beings are subject to the message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for them all to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not for a group of people because of their race or whatever other reasons that people refer to. So if they claim that Jannah is only purely for them and not for others, فَتَمَنَّوُا الْمَوْتِ. That means, then wish, tamannaw, long for death. تَمَنَّوُا الْمَوْتِ. Then wish that you die. If it's only for you, why you care too much about this life? Just wish that you die. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take your life so that you would, this is the fastest way to go to the everlasting joy that is waiting for you. إن كنتم صادقين. If you are truthful, in that claim, then long for death. And then the next ayah, وَلَنْ يَتَمَنَّوْهُ أَبَدًا. They would never, when walan is istiqbal, for the future forever. Not just those who were living at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. No, this is true till the day of judgment. So this ayah is one of the miracles of the Quran, because it states what's going to be the affairs of these people even today, tomorrow, till the day of judgment. وَلَنْ يَتَمَنَّوْهُ أَبَدًا. They would never long for death whatsoever. بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ, as a result of what their hands had sent forth. Disbelief and sins and so on. وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِالظَّالِمِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indeed, Alim, is the all-knower of the ظالمين, transgressors and those who commit kufr and so on. This ayah, or these two ayahs, as we heard, this is the literal meaning of it. A person might say, nobody long for death. Nobody wants to die. The most righteous person on earth, he won't wish to die because, for example, even if he is a righteous person, the Prophet ﷺ said that one of the good things is مَنْ طَالَ عُمُرُهُ وَحَسُنَ عَمَلُهُ, that a person, when he lives long and his deeds are good, this is a good thing, right? And death is something hated by every single human being. This is in our nature like this. So what does that mean? It means two things. The first meaning is that, as it says literally like this, and when we see the actions of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and those who followed them, at some instances they didn't care much about this life. They sacrificed their life for the sake of Allah, for the sake of His deen. So in a sense, with their actions, they're longing for death. And some statements of the Sahaba even were like this, right? In the Battle of Uhud and others, more than one. For example, Anas ibn al-Nadr, when he say wahan, which means I smell the fragrance of Jannah by the mountain of Uhud, right? And when he got some dates, this is Umayr ibn al-Humam al-Ansari, when he was eating some dates, right, to get some strength before the battle started, and the Prophet ﷺ told them, قوموا إلى جنة عرضها عرض السماء والأرض, get up for a Jannah that its width is like the heavens and the earth. So he said bakhin bakhin, which is an expression to show that he's excited and happy. So he asked the Prophet ﷺ, Jannah arduha, its width is like the heavens and the earth? He said yes. So he was eating the dates, he threw the dates on the ground and he said, if this life, the time that would take me to eat these dates, it's a long life. So he threw the dates and he went and he fought and he was martyred. So they didn't, the life and the value of life was basically on the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for them to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other than that has no value. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, in no nation, unless they are true believers, they will have this. And that is never repeated, and for Bani Israel this is never was the case. The other meaning, which is the correct meaning in the interpretation of the ayah, is this is in the context of al-mubahala. The Prophet ﷺ asked them to do this mubahala, which means that they would both get together in the same place and they would make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the liar among them to die. This is what the ayah means. That the liar from both parties, right, to die immediately, because if they are truthful, they won't die. They refused. Prophet ﷺ called them to do that after we heard the verses of calling them and giving them the da'wah and reminding them of their past and so on and so forth. So the matter was all finished. And then the last resort here is to ask them then, if you are in the truth, let's do this mubahal. We both make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the liar among us will die immediately. And they of course refused, because they knew the truth that is with the Prophet ﷺ. And if they would have done this, as more than as Ibn Abbas he said and others, they would not even take one extra breath. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause them all to die. But they refused. And the same thing happened with Wafd Najran, the Christians, those who came to the Prophet ﷺ, and it's mentioned in Surah Al-Imran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ayat of Al-Imran, almost 80 verses of Al-Imran, calling the people of the book, mainly the Christians, to the deen of Islam and reminding them of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the story of Isa alayhi salam and so on. So after the evidence has been established and so on and they refused, then the ayah of al-mubahala came. فمن حاجك فيه من بعد ما جاءك من علم فقل تعالوا ندعو أبناءنا وأبناءكم ونساءنا ونساءكم وأنفسنا وأنفسكم ثم نبتهل فنجعل لعنة الله على الكاذبين. Which means if they continue to argue after the evidence has been established, then say to them, let's bring our sons and your sons, and our women and your women, and ourselves and ourselves. That means you don't just go with your alone, no, your family, your loved ones. You're exposing your loved ones to the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you are on the falsehood. And you do the same thing, then ثُمَّ نَبْتَهِلْ. Then we invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He would send His curse on the liars. They refused. Wafd Najran, they refused. And they chose to pay the jizya to the Prophet ﷺ, but not to do this. Right? Not to do this mubahala. Because they knew that the Prophet ﷺ is on the truth, and there is no way on earth someone would have strong conviction in matters of disbelief. A strong conviction. At times of extreme necessities or difficult times, this conviction would be weak definitely. Except for the believers, of course, on the truth. So this is what the ayah means, as Ibn Abbas and others, radiallahu anhuma, he said that this was in the context of al-mubahala. وَلَا يَتَمَنَّوْهُ أَبَدًا بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ. They would never long for such a thing because of what their hands have earned with sins and disbelief and so on. وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِالظَّالِمِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best about the ظالمين. The same thing was mentioned also in Surah Al-Jumu'ah, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ هَادُوا إِنْ زَعَمْتُمْ أَنَّكُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ لِلَّهِ مِنْ دُونِ النَّاسِ فَتَمَنَّوُا الْمَوْتَ إِنْ كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Say, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, those who had the Jews, if you claim that you are awliyaullah, that you are the righteous ones, the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not the rest of the people, then long for death if you are truthful, and they will never again do that whatsoever. And then the next ayah, وَلَا تَجِدَنَّهُمْ أَحْرَصَ النَّاسِ عَلَى حَيَاةٍ وَمِنَ الَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا. That means you would find them, and verily you will find them, the greediest of mankind for life, and even greedier than those who ascribe partners to Allah. And the ayah has been stressed, the meaning of it, with all kinds of means of making a very strong statement. وَلَا تَجِدَنَّهُمْ لَامُ الْقَسَمِ, like very strong statement. That definitely, verily, for sure, you would find them أحرص الناس. أحرص الناس, al-hirs is as it's translated, the greed, which basically when a person longs for something is so much attached to it. And إِنَّمَا أَهْلَكَ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ شِدَّةَ الْحِرْصِ, which means that what destroyed the nations before is the extreme hirs, is the extreme greediness, when a person's heart is attached to this world, ready to sacrifice everything for the sake of this life, for money, for status, for anything, and to sacrifice the most valuable thing, which is one's deen. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that He would find them the most among mankind that has this attachment to this world so much that it says على حياة ولا تجدنهم أحرص الناس على حياة. They are the most among human beings. They're so attached to any life, and that's why حياة is nakira, not على الحياة الدنيا. Not that they are so eager to live in this life. No, they are the most eager to live any life, whether it's a life of honor and dignity or life of humiliation. It doesn't matter as long as they're living. So that means they'll be willing to compromise their deen. They'll be willing to do whatever it takes to live a life of humiliation just to save their lives. Right? A person with honor and dignity, sometimes death to them, right, is more beloved than to live a life of humiliation. Right? So they don't mind any type of life as long as they are to keep themselves alive. وَمِنَ الَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا, that means they are more in this than even the disbelievers among the idol worshippers and so on. يَوَدُّ أَحَدُهُمْ لَوْ يُعَمَّرُ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ وَمَا هُوَ مُزَحْزِحٍ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ أَن يُعَمَّرَ. يَوَدُّ أَحَدُهُمْ. يَوَدُّ, which means one of them would love, and in Mawadda is a deed done by the heart that means love. One of them, or any of them, would love لو يعمر ألف سنة, that he would live, يعمر meaning that he would stay on earth 1,000 years. وما هو بمزحزحه من العذاب أن يعمر, and if they lived 1,000 years, it won't push him away from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he lived long. Still, anything that is coming is near. If it's not coming, it's far away. But if it's coming, doesn't matter, 1,000, million, it's close because it's going to be finished. That they will not be pushed away from the punishment. Wallahu basirun bima ya'malun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basir, the one that is all seer of what they do. Alf sana, 1,000 years was not necessarily just exactly they just want to live 1,000 years. It's like when a person would say a number that means so many numbers, right? As they say it sometimes in the tafsir, like the Christians when they want to say a big number, they say 10,000, right? So here, for example, when they say a big number, what do they say? Zillions, when they say things like that to show that how many numbers they want to say. So the ayah is saying that one of them would wish to live for a long period of time. It doesn't matter what type of life is it, again, as long as they will be living, and this is definitely not a sign of someone that has the faith and the sincerity in one's faith. The ayat, of course, is referring to Bani Israel, and as we said, since these ayat also we have to benefit ourselves, that this ummah also will have some in this ummah that would fall into the same diseases of the hearts. So we have to be careful not to be among those who are so much attached to this dunya as they are condemned in the Quran, that would lead them to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and twist things and compromise their deen. Otherwise they will have the same similarity to Bani Israel, and they would receive also the same punishment or the like of it, one of which is for the hearts to be hardened, to be cursed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to increase in matters of deviation. As the Prophet ﷺ, there is an authentic hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, the meaning of which, he made dua ﷺ, Allahumma man amana bika meaning that, oh Allah, the one that believed in you and me as a messenger, وبأني رسول الله, أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, then حبب إليه لقاءك, right? Make him love that he would meet you, meaning what's after death. وسهل عليه قضاءك, and make it easy for him your qada, the decree, the calamities that might happen, make it easy for him. وأقلل له من الدنيا, and give him less of this dunya. The one that believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua that his followers to be like this, that they would love to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's the hadith in Al-Bukhari where Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he asked the question that he thought that he is perished, he is ruined, because he doesn't have this in himself, that he loved to die, because nobody would love to die like this. So he asked Aisha radiallahu anha, and Aisha radiallahu anha, she asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she had asked him the same question, and she said to Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, this is not what you think. And because he heard the Prophet ﷺ say, Man ahabba liqa Allah, ahabba Allahu liqa'ah. Whoever loves to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah would love to meet him. وَمَنْ كَرِهَ لِقَاءَ اللَّهِ كَرِهَ اللَّهُ لِقَاءَهُ. And whoever hates to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hate to meet him. So Abu Hurairah was so concerned, that means, which means death, and nobody wants to die. So Aisha radiallahu anha corrected him by the statement of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, that it's in some of the narrations, إذا حشرج الصدر, when the chest is wheezing, or when the soul is coming out and the chest is having this noise, and وتشنجت الأصابع, which means when the fingers are stretched, meaning all the signs of the moment of death, then the person would see the angels, he will be given the glad tidings, then he would love to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So at the most difficult moment that everybody fears, which is the exact moment of death, when the soul reaches the hulqum, the throat, where that person is, that's it, في انقطاع من الدنيا. He is done with the dunya. He cannot speak to anyone, he cannot communicate to anyone. It's the moment where the soul comes out. Then he will be given, if he's given the glad tidings that he is among the righteous and the believers, he doesn't want to come back to the dunya anymore. He loves to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of what is waiting for him. He is returning to the mercy of Allah. And what is better than for someone to return to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the opposite of that is when he's given, the punishment and the bad news, he would hate then to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of what is awaiting for him. So that means a person doesn't have to panic, oh, I have to love to die. No, this is a normal thing that a person doesn't like to die. But it is part of our deen to remember death a lot. And the Prophet ﷺ, this is his order, أكثروا ذكر هذه اللذات. Remember death a lot. So this is part of our deen. Is it to make us sad and so on? No, it's to make us never forget about the reality of this life. So that a person would act according to what's coming ahead. So that a person would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and still enjoy things in this life, but in the right way. As a mean to establish the purpose of our life, and the deen becomes the most valuable thing. Once the remembrance of death and the non-frequently mentioning death becomes part of one's life, immediately the person will be in state of forgetfulness. He can still make salah and so on, but when death is not mentioned a lot, forgetfulness, which leads the person to have hardness in one's heart and so on. So this is something that brings the joy that the person is doing what is right, and it brings more fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if a person is committing sins and disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person knows that he might not, Fajr might not come and he's still alive, nobody would miss Salatul Fajr. Nobody would pray Fajr at home. Everybody would pray in the masjid to make sure that he meets Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the salah in the masjid and so on. Right? And this is how Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he said when he mentioned the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب أو عابر سبيل. Be in this dunya like a stranger or a wayfarer, someone traveling, going from one point to the other. He's not worried too much while he's traveling to be established. His goal is to reach his destination. And then when he heard that from the Prophet sallallahu Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, إذا أصبحت فلا تنتظر المساء وإذا أمسيت فلا تنتظر الصباح. Which means if you are in the morning, don't long for the night to come. And if the night comes, don't think that you would live till the morning. And how many of us do this really? That when a person goes to bed, he might not wake up, right? Which is, nobody can guarantee anything at any time. A person might lose his life. So to that extent, a Muslim should be prepared for the moment of death. It's not to make the person panic or anything, but to be prepared. To be repenting from all sins. Not to wait for next year or next day or after 10 years or after graduation or after getting married. No, immediate repentance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because nobody can guarantee anything. Plus this dunya has no value. And if they say the average every 30 seconds, I don't know, over 100 people they die in 30 seconds throughout the world, that means death is happening every second of our life. So it is going to be our turn one day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best when. And this is how the Prophet ﷺ lived his life, and the companions radiallahu anhum, to not to fall into this disease. So what is mentioned here in this ayat, that Bani Israel, they hate death so much as a result of their bad deeds. So the same thing, if a person is more into the sins and disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would hate death so much during his life and at the moment of death and so on. So the only cure to this is to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to follow the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and to frequently remember death. In this environment that we live in, you get a salat janazah once every so long, right? So there's not too many reminders of one's death, right? Death is, you can, unless you're a doctor and you see these things with your own eyes. So we need to frequently say it and remember death and talk about death, right? And usually when people are having good time, once death is mentioned, they don't like it, right? They say, why are you mentioning this now? It's not to make anybody upset, it's to make everybody face the reality of this life. It's actually bring joy if a person would be steadfast on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to remind ourselves and to remind our families and to be steadfast on this. Very briefly, just 3 minutes, we just see what Imam Sa'di rahimahullah said. The ayat, قُلْ إِن كَانَتْ لَكُمْ دَارُ الْآخِرَةِ, which means to correct what they say. So the qul here, say, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to correct this false belief that they have. If you have the hereafter or Jannah is only pure for you as you claimed, that only those who are Jews or Christians will enter it, and the hellfire will never touch you except for counted days. If you are truthful, then call or long for death, which is the mubahala. This is the issue between them and the Prophet ﷺ, for both to invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on something that is so easy and so simple. Just ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whoever is alive to die immediately. That would, and if they die, they would reach their destination quicker. So they refused. So then it becomes very clear and very obvious that the reason why they turned away from the truth is stubbornness and turning away from the truth, not because of what they have of the truth. And how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَتَمَنَّوْا أَبَدًا, they would never long for it because of the disbelief and sins, because they know that this is the path to for them to be punished as a result of their evil acts. So the death is the worst thing to them. And how they long for it, and they hoped for such a thing, but it would never happen. And if it happened that anybody would live for 1,000 years, it would not save them from the punishment of Allah, which shows the wisdom of Allah and something that should be present in our life so much that anything coming, it's very close. That's why again the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Jannatu أقرب إلى أحدكم من شراك نعله والنار مثل ذلك. The Jannah is closer to one of you than his shoes, and the hellfire is the same way. How close the matter is, right? So a person should be prepared for that. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to soften our hearts and to make us steadfast on His deen and to follow the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we continue inshallah ta'ala with more verses. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.